Here's Shed. Off the window, no. Roberts tried to get it. Shed for the win. Got it. Jamal Shed plays the hero again.
Back to pass. Donovan Smith. Smith steps up in the pocket, unloads it, throws it all the way downfield into the end zone. Tipped, and it is caught. Caught by the Cougars. Caught for a touchdown. Unbelievable. Caught by Stephon Johnson.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby. Yes!
Welcome to the Scott Holman Podcast, back for our 10th football season opener here on this show. A season opener that's very long awaited for the 9-ish months that we've been long awaiting seeing U of H's new anticipated head coach actually lead a team onto the field against what's going to be, I think, so we're not all together thrilled about, but a very good quality opponent visiting TDCU for week one. Bobby, it's a topic that almost needs no introduction, although it's not our only topic tonight. We are previewing a Cougar volleyball program that has fast become one of the premier programs of this athletic department. How you hanging in there, friend, here at the end of August?
Buddy, I am wonderful. We are getting a nice kind of cool front coming through the next week. It's supposed to be like highs in the 80s. And after the last 2-3 months that I've had, and I have the busiest work weekend of the year coming up, September, what is that, 2nd, 3rd, whatever Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week is, cannot get here fast enough, Sam.
Yeah, I was thinking, we don't like to navel gaze here at the show. And also, quick aside, glad you're getting the cool front right after I leave Texas and take nearly all of the allergies in my lungs with
Perfect.
it. Yeah, exactly. There's been some really good, really weird season openers in the 10 seasons that we've had podcasts. Obviously, a really big one. The Oklahoma game is an all-time
Yep.
U of H regular season game at NRG. Just everything that game was, even if the season in some ways is disappointing. Losing Tom Herman was disappointing to the team you lost him to in some ways. Never going to take 2016 from you. It's just one day to be a Cougar fan that was unlike any other. But you also had the 2020 season opener where even in that weird season, U of H was especially late to get him on the field just because of all the various COVID maladies of opponents U of H played, to the point that a week or so before, you'd had the team trucks get up to Baylor only to have that game called because of COVID. You had the 2017 season, everything with Hurricane Ike, Harvey, that big hurricane after Ike, Hurricane Harvey in Houston, and not having that season start until the end of week 2 for a night game at Arizona. Some really strange ones in there. I think this is one of the better matchups on paper we're going to get to talk about at the beginning of the season with the Cougars hosting the UNLV Rebels. Got some housekeeping at the top here, Bobby, if you'll allow me. Got to talk about Charlie Hustle, as I always do here, but got a new Charlie Hustle topic to talk about. The Charlie Hustle varsity jackets released for a number of Big 12 schools. Gorgeous ones. Bobby's already shaking his head and making approving sounds because they're just that good. They're red. They got the little white screaming Cougar logo on the pocket there. Really, really good stuff. You need to go to charliehustle.com. Right now, you can multitask with this show. Use our promo code PAWD15. Get you that fantastic Cougar varsity jacket, but also get yourself something from a fantastic collection of Cougar Charlie Hustle wearables. Great Big 12 selection as well. Really can't beat what our good friends at Charlie Hustle offer you on the World Wide Web. As I said before, charliehustle.com. Use that promo code PAWD15. Don't forget also, please support us on the show if you don't do so already and you have the means to do so by going to patreon.com/shpodcast. As little as $5 a month, you can support the show and everything that Bobby and I do on a week in, week out basis over there. Bobby, got something a little different here at the top too. Before we get to the topics at hand, you're like, oh my God, he didn't say something different. Don't worry, bud. This is a show only thing. I have a volleyball season ticket this year because I think that's the least I could do to support Dave Rare and everything he does over there for why I said the top one of the preeminent Cougar programs. If you were listening to this show and you would like to go to a game on the 5th or the 7th of next week, those are Cougars volleyball's first 2 home games. If you email us, shpodcast@gmail.com, and say literally nothing else other than I listened to this episode of the podcast, I would like to go to the game on the 5th or the 7th. If you were the first person to email me, you will get that ticket. That is how simple it is. I'm not going to mention it on social media. I'm not going to do anything of the sort, but I'm going to reward you, the person that listens to the show. If you want to go Thursday or Saturday, that's the 5th or the 7th of next week, to see Cougar volleyball all you got to do, email us at shpodcast@gmail.com, and you will get a ticket. It really is that simple. Isn't that crazy, Bobby?
I didn't even know he was going to do that. So I'm actually, I'm a little disappointed I'm not going down to Houston this weekend. I would love to check that out.
Privately, Bobby, if you were in Houston and want to see Cougar volleyball, I know a guy who could help you out on that one.
You know a guy or two?
Yeah, I think so. So, yeah, keep that in mind. All the other stuff in mind. Bobby.
I can't wait for Dustin to email us.
Yeah, he has a season ticket. I'd be like, you have a season ticket. Feel free to hit me up about the football one because he's got the men's basketball tickets. I got the football tickets. That's a symbiotic relationship that him and I have. My host emeritus and good friend. But volleyball tickets, he's SOL there because he's already got one. He never, and to be his credit, he would not. He would very much use the tickets.
I could just see that conversation happening in our group text. Like, Dustin, why did you text us for the tickets?
That's more of a you or me. He's way too rational to
That's fair.
to do that. To be fair, so obviously topic at hand, not the only topic at hand, but a big topic at hand for this week: the Cougs taking on the UNLV Rebels at TDC Stadium. And Bobby and I have our thoughts about this game. We have kind of a new preview format we want to break out for y'all. A little season contest maybe in there, talk about as well. And we're going to try to do this, I think, week in, week out this season as much as we can. Bring on somebody who covers this team in a week in, week out basis and certainly knows more about the Rebels than we do. So we brought on Mike Grimala of the Las Vegas Sun to help you, the listeners, and ourselves as we did this, get to know a little bit more about our week one opponent. We're very happy to be joined tonight for the first time on the Scott Holland podcast to help us know the UNLV Rebels football team a little bit better. Mike Grimala of the Las Vegas Sun here to kind of give us an idea of what the 2024 version of UNLV football looks like. Mike, thanks for taking a little bit of time out of your Tuesday to join us tonight.
Of course.
So, wanted to kind of start 30,000 foot big picture question here. You've covered Rebel football for a number of years here in the Valley, and last season was historical positive outlier for the program at the D1 level. In what ways is the day-to-day mood around the program different now this fall camp versus a year ago when the program had some interest around with Barry Odom jumping on for the first season, but at that point hadn't had a winning season prior to that in over a decade?
I'd say like the biggest shift is clearly in expectations internally and externally. Like last year, obviously a new coaching staff, new offense. No one really knew what to expect. And with UNLV's history, expectations are pretty low. They exceeded everything, had maybe the best season in program history, played for the Mountain West title. And then in the offseason, somehow managed to bring just about everyone back. So expectations are very high. Then you add in the group of 5 playoff spot that's, out there. And people around here are talking about that as though UNLV is a contender for it if they can win the Mountain West. So expectations are probably last year you were hoping, if you were a fan, you're saying like, if they can get 6 wins and get into a bowl game, that would completely turn the program around. And they did that by week 7 and they played for a championship and they made a bowl. Now the expectations is not 6 wins. It's like, can they get to 10 wins? Can they win the Mountain West? Can they play in the college football playoffs? That's the biggest difference from a year ago to me, very clearly.
Yeah, real quick. Like I'm the one co-host here who's based out here in Vegas, and I have UNLV alum boss who was grousing to me this week about them being picked behind Boise for the Mountain West title. It's just like, it's crazy to think about that in the context of UNLV football before that not really being a very good program. Bobby, sorry, I stepped on your toes there.
No, you're good, bud. You're good. So this was a pretty run-first UNLV offense by tendency last year. And even though there hasn't been a starting QB named yet, I'm pretty sure I saw 2 oars on that on the depth chart. 2 of the 3 possible starters have shown, varying degrees of running ability in their careers. How different will this offense look, if it will look different at all, in your opinion, based on the skill set of those 2 of those possible starting quarterbacks?
Well, I think they want a running quarterback, a quarterback who can run their keepers, can run their option plays. It's something they really did not. It's a big part of the playbook. It's something they really couldn't use last year. Their starting quarterback at the beginning of the year, Doug Brumfield, was more of a runner, not a shifty guy, but a guy who could, with long speed, if you could get him out into the open. He got hurt in week 2. And they went to their backup quarterback, who was more of a pocket passer, kind of athletic, but sort of a big body, not really going to shake any tackles, not going to explode through any holes. So they kind of put that section of the playbook, in the closet. And I think it's going to be out this year, no matter who ends up starting, especially if it's Matthew Sluka, a guy who is a bona fide, excellent running quarterback. So when you talk about, it's sort of been a topic that's been raised around here, the go-go offense, which is what they call it. They kind of sprung it on teams last year. Opponents weren't ready for it. They had never seen it before. Now it's sort of the second time around. There's a lot of film. But this is a whole new wrinkle that they really didn't show much last year. So I think the running quarterback aspect is going to be a big factor. It would not surprise me if Matthew Sluka starts on Saturday against Houston and he ends up with 12, 15 carries.
Okay, so you named it. You said a name there, and I'm obviously not asking you to break any news here on our podcast. But who do you think gets the most snaps at quarterback on Saturday for the Rebels, or do you foresee it being multiple guys getting pretty close to one another?
I think it's going to be Sluka. He was the guy by the end of training camp who was taking most of the snaps with the first team. He's the guy who's the better fit in the offense. He's the higher upside play. He's the guy that if everything goes right, could be an all Mountain West type quarterback. He's the guy they really wanted in the offseason. So I feel like he's going to get the most starts. I feel like he's going to get some leeway to sort of settle into that starting job. It wouldn't be surprising. I would almost expect two quarterbacks to play. So the other guy, Haj Malik Williams, he was here in spring, which Matthew Sluka was not. So he's a little more experienced with the playbook. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a series in each half or some sort of arrangement like that early in the season. But I think it's going to be Sluka.
So we asked a variation of this question of ourselves when we previewed Houston's offense and defense earlier this month. Which player on offense and defense, respectively, who wasn't on this UNLV roster a year ago, do you think will have the biggest impact on Saturday's game?
That's a good question. You're talking on offense. Let's see. I might have to go with. It's a tough question because they bring everyone back except the quarterback is the one place where they've got a newcomer. The only other spot, they bring back most of their offensive line. They're starting receivers. They're starting tight end. They're all seniors. The only other spot is that ex receiver, which is a transfer from Texas, Casey Kane, who's a big 6'4" guy. They liked what he did in training camp. That's a spot where they really struggled last year. Ricky White is obviously a really good receiver. Jacob DeJesus is their slot guy. They love him. They never settled on a third guy. They didn't really have anyone that could threaten defenses from that spot last year. It was a real weakness. They lost games because they really couldn't find someone who could reliably catch the ball. They think Kane is going to be that guy. He's 6'4", like a red zone type target, a boundary guy, someone who can at least keep defensive backs out of the box and have to respect him when he's running down the field. So, by default, he's got to be the pick. Unless another guy to watch for is Greg Burrell, who is a true freshman running back. He's a local kid. He didn't play much. He didn't really have an explosive senior season in high school because he was dealing with nagging injuries throughout the year. But he's a pretty good prospect, and he's healthy. And he looked great in training camp. And this is a team that's not afraid to give carries to true freshmen. We saw Jaden Thomas come in as a true frosh last year and sort of take over the backfield to finish with 12 touchdowns. So Greg Burrell wouldn't surprise me if he's the number 2 running back in, even in week 1, and he gets double-digit carries and maybe breaks a big a gain or two. So those are really the only 2 guys by default if you're looking at newcomers on the offense.
I want to jump in here. This next question was going to be Bobby's, but I meant to actually ask about this guy. Jaden Thomas is a really interesting story because came to UNLV with, I think it was an unheard of, was almost kind of like a ghost in terms of like his recruiting prior to coming to UNLV. Like, could you give a quick summary of how Jaden Thomas goes from being, 0-star recruit to one of the very best freshmen in college football last year?
Yeah, he's a guy who was not recruited. He had one offer. It was from UNLV. He talked about it last week. He just was not really highly thought of coming out of high school. He couldn't really generate much interest. He's a fast kid, but he's sort of slightly built. Not if just to look at him, if you give him the eye test, he doesn't look like a dynamic runner. He doesn't really look the part, but he got the pads on and you get him going downhill, and he's got really good speed, and it's something that I guess you've probably got to see a bunch of carries before you really appreciate it is the contact balance is something they talk about with him. He sort of takes that first hit or that first nudge from the defense, and he's able to not let it slow him down. He sort of stays on balance, keeps going forward. And he ended up being, though he's, 5'10", 170 pounds last year, he ended up being their goal line back because he's the guy that's best dealing with contact and driving forward. And he said he put on a little weight this year. He says he's more explosive, but that's a guy who a lot of the credit goes to the system. Like obviously it's a system that's designed to produce running backs and make running backs look good. And he's a guy who took advantage of that and is poised for, I would say, a pretty good sophomore year now.
All right, so you talked about that receiver kind of being a question mark, but outside of the quarterback position, is there somebody on the defense or that you think may be the biggest question mark that Rebel fans have about the 2024 season? It could be something on the offense or on the defense, but what do you think is that biggest kind of question mark that Rebel fans will have about the 2024 team in the preseason?
Well, the thing that sort of came up to haunt them towards the end of last year was the secondary, especially the deep ball, deep coverage. So they added a guy, Tony Grimes. He's a former 5-star recruit who's played at a couple schools. Super talented. He's like the kind of long, a 5-star, 6'2" cornerback with all the tools that would have never come to UNLV in the past. But now with the new transfer rules, he's on his third school. He's got 1 year left to play. They got him, and he looked tremendous in the offseason. So that's a guy I feel like who could make a really big impact because UNLV, they like to play a lot of defensive backs. On Saturday, you'll see their most snaps are going to have at least 5, sometimes 6 defensive backs on the field. They really play small. They like to be small and fast, but they really couldn't stop they weren't great at stopping the deep ball and explosive plays last year. So one more good cornerback. They also added some safety depth. So if they can keep Houston from completing balls down the field, that's something that will be that will help them a lot because that's something they really struggled with last year. So Tony Grimes, that's a name to watch. Jalen Catalon at safety, he's going to start. That's another guy they like. So probably anyone in the defensive secondary.
I've been saying to every U of H fan that listened to me during the offseason, looking ahead to this week 1 game, that Ricky White, who you mentioned a little bit ago, is one of the best opposing players, full stop, Coug fans will see this season. Not only the best receivers, best opposing players, period. From watching him and covering him, what makes White so good in your opinion? And I think also kind of related in an era where standout group of 5 players get picked off more often than ever by bigger name programs. How has UNLV held on to one of the most electric receivers out there?
Well, Tony, the first part of your question, I asked for a story I'm working on. I asked, some of his teammates and his position coach, and how does he get open? Because if you, he's like 6'1", he's 185 pounds, whatever. He's not like the fastest 40 time. He's not, going up, over the top of people. He's not like a physically dominant guy, but he's just always open down the field, especially on deep balls. And they said, pretty much it's just he's got a feel for it. When he's running his routes, he knows the exact moment when his defender is off balance or in between strides or leaning one way. He knows the exact moment to break off his route and head in the other direction. And he just gets separation. And he's become a 3-level receiver. They throw it to him short. They love him over the middle, crossing. And they got into a routine of pretty much every game on the first drive at some point, they're going to take a deep shot to him. And they hit so many last year for big plays early in games. And that's just because he can run any route and he just has a feel to get open. So it's kind of hard to describe. And then the second part of your question is how they kept him. So in the offseason, obviously he has a big breakout year. He's, almost 1,500 yards. And other schools wanted him. He got offers from other programs. Notre Dame came after him. Big money offers. And UNLV really had to scramble their NIL collectives and get people to, reallocate funds from, general donations and things like that and sort of earmark it for him so they could bump up his NIL rate for this year. So he got a nice raise in the offseason. They couldn't match that, that upper echelon Power 5 money, but I think they were able to bridge that gap just enough to keep him. And UNLV is not a program that can do that for everyone. If they've got 5 players who are asking for more money and, hey, double my pay or triple my pay, they cannot do that. They'll say goodbye. But for Ricky White, who's, got a chance to be an All-American, which UNLV will never have again, that's a guy they were willing to sort of move mountains for. So that's how they kept him in the offseason.
All right, so we talked about Ricky White, one of the guys who everyone is paying good attention to and knows, but who are some of the below-the-radar players that maybe Sam and I and everyone who's covering U of H and this game in some form or fashion might be overlooking? And who do you think will have a big impact on Saturday's game and the larger 2024 Rebel season as a whole?
Well, a guy to always watch out for is Jacob DeJesus. He's pound for pound might be the best player on the team. He's listed at 5'7". He might be a little that might even be generous, but he's their slot guy, and he's not a short ball slot guy. He's a guy they're going to send down the seam. They're going to try to deep crossers. They take deep shots to him, and he's just quick and shifty. And they try to get game breaking plays with him, and also. He is their kick and punt returner. He's second team All-American as a kick returner. So that's a guy who is special teams is something they put a lot of pride in and a lot of work in. Like UNLV plays their starters on special teams. They try to get advantages on special teams. So their coverage units, it's all their starting defenders. Their return game, it's all the starters. It's Jacob DeJesus. They're trying to get big plays. They've got special returns, special plays. They spend a lot of time on it. So whether it's, third down, and short and taking a deep throw to DeJesus or trying to get some sort of special gimmick punt return for him, that's a guy they always try to get a big play out of every week. So that's a guy I would watch for if you're a Houston fan.
All right, Mike, we've really appreciated your time with us tonight. I wanted to get you out of here on something more general Vegas related. Like me, you have made Vegas your adopted home, and I feel like I'm quite often advocating for the city and surrounding areas having more to it than just the fancy hotels and casinos on Las Vegas Boulevard to all my friends back home. For all the Cougar fans listening or watching who have plans to visit here at some point in the future, like many people do around the country, what is something they should do next time they're out here that maybe they haven't thought to do previously, maybe is a bit more off the beaten path?
For Las Vegas, that's a good question. Las Vegas has a drive-in theater. I love drive-in theaters whenever I'm on the road. So if you guys, I know Houston's got a couple. I'm planning to go on Friday night before the game. So Las Vegas has a good one. It's got like 5 screens. It's called the West Wind Drive-In. So if you're like a movie guy and you want like a good night out, it's open year round. So I wouldn't recommend it maybe in the middle of July because it's still 100 degrees at night. But, maybe in a more moderate season, come out. I love to do it. So that would be my recommendation. It's off the beaten path, but it's like on the outskirts of the city. It doesn't take too long to get to. But yeah, see a couple movies, grab some popcorn. That's a good way to spend a night in Las Vegas.
I saw one of the Godzilla movies in like spring of 2021 at Westwind. I can co-sign is a good recommendation from Mike here. Mike, before you go, can you tell the Cougar fans where they can read your writings on the World Wide Web?
Yeah, go to lasvegassun.com or at Mike Grimala if you want to follow my tweets during the game or before the game. We'll try to see who that starting quarterback is going to be, maybe in pregame warmups so we can discern that and I'll tweet it out. But yeah, follow me on Twitter or lasvegassun.com.
So I'm going to time myself on this, Bobby, if you allow me, so I don't go too long. But I watch a good amount of general college football, but I still think I'm slightly more qualified than average to talk about UNLV because, as I mentioned in the last question to Mike, has mentioned the show a few times, I've called Sin City my home base since the beginning of the year 2020, and the Rebels have definitely become kind of my local team who I passively root for. And excluding that first COVID season, where they didn't basically allow anyone in to watch, I've attended at least one Rebel game each season. We'll probably do the same this season. And like we talked about with Mike, this is a program coming off one of its best seasons in history, certainly in Division I history. And that's not a high bar. Football's always been the second fiddle to the much more popular Runner Rebels men's basketball program here, but it was still a good season. They have a second-year head coach in Barry Odom, who had a 4-year, not great, but not awful run as head coach as Alma Mater, Missouri from 2016 to 19. And before and after that was kind of a pretty well-respected defensive coach. It was kind of a surprise hire because he's never coached further west than like Arkansas, but I think it just speaks to some coaches being adaptable enough to succeed independent of being from a certain part of the country or coaching frequently in a certain part of the country or certain conference. And I think bigger picture also speaks to UNLV putting the needed resources into this football program more consistently than it has in many years, if ever. This is unfortunately for, I think, a U of H team that could really use an easy gimme game on the start of this year's schedule, a good opponent who I also think kind of went into the offseason with a bit of a, for lack of a better word, red ass because of how the last few games of the 2023 season went, despite it being on the whole a very good season for that program. And how we're going to kind of look at opponents week by week over the season in our preview episodes is kind of like doing our own general game plan. We're not former or current Division I coaches here, so obviously what Willie and the guys are doing over in the football offices will be a bit more sophisticated than what Bobby and I are talking about here, but we're going to kind of on a week in, week out basis try to look at each opponent and what U of H can semi-realistically do to give itself the best possible chance to win this football game. So I want to kind of throw it to you, Bobby, to start here. What do you think are the things that the Cougs absolutely can and should do when they have the ball against the UNLV defense to potentially, to win this game or put themselves in the best position to win this game?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that the Cougs are going to have to do is they're going to have to win the O-line battle. I think with this offense, we've talked about how we think that the new Cougar offense is going to be a little bit more run focused and things like that. We're going to have to consistently win up front. As you heard in the interview, UNLV loves to play with a lot of defensive backs out on the field. Nickel dime is almost base for them. And so you're going to have space to run and establish the run as long as you're winning. As long as you're winning up front. If you can get bodies, if you can get helmets on helmets, I think we could really see some lanes open up for the run game. And so that's going to be a big thing for me, is setting up that run game and maybe drawing a couple of those linebackers out a little bit away from the box, those DBs, that swarming defense that Mike was talking about, watching them, getting them away from the line so they can't swarm as quickly. I think if we start winning up front, that's in what coach doesn't say we need to win up front. We need to win up front. We need to win up front. But I think if the Cougs can establish the run and really start to pound the ball a little bit, I think UNLV may not be happy with what they see. They had a middle of the Mountain West defense last year, so coming out and just controlling the line can really help this staff even see what they have with the offensive line. That's a big thing Willie Fritz has said multiple times throughout the offseason, is that we're gonna see different offensive line makeups in the first probably 3 games of the season, he said. Well, this is step 1. Let's see if the first guess that Coach Fritz is taking is going to be the right one. What about you?
I mean, UNLV's second best of the 2 main units last year by a pretty wide margin was that defense, even though that side of the ball is especially their head coach. So I wouldn't take it as a given that they'll be terrible on defense or anything like that. Mike mentioned Catalan and Catalan and Wise, excuse me, the 5-star from UNC and A&M, who were both like really talented guys. I want to mention a couple other guys who I don't know if you mentioned by name as well in that defense. Part of why I think the run game needs to work, like you were talking about, is that I think this is actually a pretty good secondary. They were bad against the big play sometimes last year, but they were also very good at taking the ball away. This is a unit that had 17 picks a year ago, which regardless of low competition is good. That's over 1 per game. That is going to, if you can do that on average, like that's going to make it a lot easier to win football games. Explains why this team won 9 of the 14 games they played in last year. But really, to get to the narrative side here, Bobby, UNLV has a couple of guys, Houston area kids, both guys who were in the class of 2021. Jonathan Baldwin, originally from Dobie and Pasadena, and Cameron Oliver from Fort Bend County, Travis, I believe, out in Richmond. Both Houston area guys, and they'll finally get a chance to play in front of all their friends and family who still live in the area against this program that we think of UH accurately right now as a smaller P4 program, a program that has history, deserves to be at this level, but is not one of the bigger fish right now, certainly in terms of being a football program. But like, these are both guys who are, quote unquote, rightly or wrongly, overlooked by the local program. U of H is the big local program, certainly for recruits of that level. You don't think those guys who are now veteran multi-year starters for a team who have its best season ages aren't going to be a bit fired up to play against the Cougs, play against the program that didn't recruit them, Bobby? Like that's a big thing going into this one. Not saying, narrative doesn't win the football game. Being fired up doesn't guarantee anything like that, but bet there's a little bit extra pep in the step for both those guys.
Yeah, and look, you're talking to the vibes guy here, right? the guy who comes through and I know advanced analytics says that momentum isn't a thing and things like that, but when you come out and you're just a little bit more fired up, I'm not saying that players aren't fired up every time when they come out and things like that, that they're not giving 100%, but sometimes that little bit extra juice and you'll see this often is a team will come out and they will play for their teammate. If you've watched any sports ever, you'll see where a guy goes back to his old team, right? He goes back to the old arena, and maybe you're a fan of the Las Vegas Golden Knights. Their first season, they said it themselves that it was a revenge tour for them. One of the big things that they talked about was getting to go back to the teams that didn't protect them. And I think you raise a valid point. They have a couple of guys in here that have played or that played in Houston. They're going to play in front of their family. We could see some guys come out fired up, and their teammates are going to come out fired up for them. And that's something to just kind of be on the lookout for.
Just say also, like, there are situations like that where guys press too. Guys
Yep.
really come out there fired up, and you it's probably it's
Make
a mixture.
a couple of dumb plays.
Yeah.
Make a couple of dumb plays. Over pursue. Start pushing when they shouldn't push, and things like that.
Most likely, I think it's probably a mixture of that. Like, you come out a little fired
Absolutely.
up, and does that maybe make you a little jittery, maybe a little less focused? Like, sure, but also, like, it does give you a little extra step. Like, I think it probably won't be one extreme or the other, but I think something that I haven't seen talked about as much that I think a part of the fabric of the story. But anyway, I think the Rebels, they do have some guys who experience that defensive front. Would be remiss if I didn't mention, once again, Jackson Woodard, tackling machine, well over 100 total last year, first team All Mountain West guy. They weren't that good at rushing the passer a year ago, though. I think that's going to be important here, too. Obviously, teams can improve year on year, but this offensive line is going to be very new. A lot of new pieces, and I don't hate that U of H, the first live action these guys are going to see is against a team that had 20 sacks in 14 games last year. Obviously, some defenses choose stylistically to go after the quarterback a bit more, but I don't think anyone is shooting to have 20 sacks in 14 games unless you're playing nothing but like option style teams. That's still probably a return that Barry Odom would like a bit more from that defense. And then again, some good players in the defensive front, but I think UNLV is definitely second best against the run versus the pass. And I'm not saying U of H needs to, can easily go out there, plug and play, 250, 300 rushing yards, easy, things like that. I would just say if U of H really struggles badly to run the ball in this one, it can't be other than just not a red flag about, Willie Fritz isn't the right man for this job, because, somebody out there's going to have that galaxy brain take Bob in. Thank God, I think I've avoided the corners that those people lurk in, but it probably won't be anything that's a good sign for being able to run the ball in the current year. Like, UNLV does a lot of things pretty well. I think you can at least run the ball passively in this one. It's a bit of a concern. So I think you and I agree. I think the important thing here, obviously, like you said, like, you want to run the ball well every week, but I think with UNLV having a good experience, talented secondary, they really got that sweet spot of returning proven guys and also intriguing former high-level recruits, P4 player type guys who, maybe you wouldn't have gotten previously, but now you do because of the transfer portal. I think you really, the onus is on U of H to game one, prove that identity that, like, okay, it's going to be a more run focused program. Okay, well, you really got to do it, because if you're one-dimensional passing the ball against this team, it's probably not going to go well in TDSU Stadium on Saturday night.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's you're going to have a well-rounded offense, but I think like I said, establishing that run and keeping the quarterback upright. Not that we're introducing anything groundbreaking here, but if we're not able to do those things against this defensive line, we could be in a little bit of trouble.
You want to do it every week, but if you are not doing it this week,
yep.
UNLV has some things that are very exceptional. We're about to talk about Ricky White here in a second. Ricky White, very exceptional football player. UNLV was an exceptionally good offense last year. If you are not at least running the football reasonably well and keeping Donovan Smith upright more often than not against this defensive front that didn't rush the passer well last year and wasn't awful against the run, but really wasn't great against the run. Whole buddy is not going to be easier the remaining 11 games of the season. I'm a full believer in this staff. We just see how much of a year one reality this is going to be under Willie Fritz. I think what the offense is able to do in those facets against this UNLV defense, I think will tell us a lot, Bobby. It'll be very illuminating, if you will. So kind of flip that in your head. What your first thoughts? What do you think the Cougs really need to do well defensively? Our first look at the Shao Wood defense when this really good Rebel offense has the ball.
Yeah, I think for me, UNLV is very much a run first option offense. And so you would think, can you get to the backfield? Can you stop the run? Can you clog that? But for me, a big thing that really stands out is going to be the wide receivers versus the cornerbacks. And I say that because hopefully the D-line is getting into the backfield. And I think what we're going to see is some longer third downs, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, where first and second down didn't go as well for them as they might have hoped, as that UNLV offense had hoped it had gone. 3rd, 8, 3rd, 9. Can you lock down their receivers? We talked about some of their receivers with Mike. You mentioned a couple. They have I'm blanking on the transfer's name. 6 foot
Casey
3.
Kane.
Casey Kane.
Not even in my notes, but I just vaguely remembered.
Not the famous NASCAR driver. This is a football player. Little NASCAR reference for you.
C-A-I-N, not K-A-H-N-E, right? That's how Casey...
I can't remember. K-H-A-N-E, I think is Casey Kane.
Oh, it's with a K. Casey with a K. That was the part.
Yeah, I'll stall while you look that up.
No, I looked it up. It was Casey with a K, K-H-A-N-E. I didn't get the last name right. I got the
yeah.
Sorry.
So Casey Kane's going to be there. There's a lot of expectations for him to make up on those 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9s, 3rd and 11s, 3rd and 12s, things like that. And you and I discussed this in our defensive preview. We actually are kind of confident with some of the transfers that were brought in the defensive backfield and things like that. So can they actually show up when the defense needs them to? They're not going to see a ton of action, I don't think, but they're going to see enough action that it's going to, when they do see action, it's going to be very important. Mike talked about how they take early shots. They'll take a shot downfield almost every game, and it connected a lot. Don't let them get that momentum. Don't let them shut our crowd up. Not that we have like the most intimidating home field, but it's going to be the season opener. It's going to be a pretty full house, I think. 6:30, it'll be a little warm, but everyone will be feeling it. If we don't fill the house all season, but game 1, the students are there. They're hyped up. Don't let them beat you deep early on and take all of that out. So I'm really looking at the wide receivers versus the cornerback matchup, and we really need the U of H defensive backfield to really step up here. What about you, bud?
I also wanted to dive into UNLV's offense real quick because it's a really interesting one. And I think this will be a real good week 1 test, not a permanent, just like, oh, is this going to work here defensively? Because it's long season and a lot of work to be done. I think if you're expecting this all to get fixed in one game, I think you're a fool, and I'm being kind, just based on the amount of work that Fritz and the staff have to do. But I think it's a good test of whether in the offseason, Shallwood and the defensive staff was able to make this a more fundamentally sound group, because UNLV wants to do a lot of the things that gave this Cougar defense fits in the last 2 seasons. Their offense, the go-go offense, I think Mike mentioned it at least briefly, is run by Brendan Marion, well-regarded, fairly young assistant. He was actually, he was a receiver. I think he was the top receiver on that Tulsa team that U of H hung 70 on back in 2008, if you want to go back in the personal time machine there.
Oh, so the personal time machine, sorry to interrupt, but the personal, when we hung 70 on Tulsa, and one of their offensive linemen who had a mullet, was a big dude, because I had been talking a ton of smack, looked at me and he said, because I don't know why we decided to rush, but everyone was about to rush, and I remember
we were like 7-5 in the regular season. Beating Tulsa when they were top 25 was a big deal.
Yeah. Sorry for the tangent here, but you can tell the students are about to rush, and I'll never forget, because I had been talking so much smack that game. He looked at me and he goes, "If you step foot on this field, I'm ending you." And I was like, "I guess I'm not rushing." And everyone's like, "You still should have gone. He couldn't have done anything." And it's like, no, once your foot hits the turf, he could act like he was threatened or something like that, and I was just like, yeah, I'm not risking that, because I talked a lot of smack. Sorry.
Discretion being the better part of valor there. Previously was a smaller school OC at Howard and William and Mary. Also was a receivers coach in the last several years at Pitt when Jordan Addison was there, and UT Austin as well. Basic principles of his offense are, it's 4 points. I'm probably oversimplifying it, but lots of unusual looks, a lot of unbalanced receiver looks, wing T, pistol formations, like the maximum amount of guys in the backfield, a lot of 2 backs with the quarterback in the backfield, also a lot of inside and outside zone, using RPO to generally kind of test the eye discipline of the opposing defenses, and a lot of pre-snap motion and eye candy there. A lot of using tempo, no huddle, as well to control pace and kind of tire out your opposing defenses. And you can kind of take that almost all the way back to his last OC at Tulsa, Gus Malzahn, who's now a veteran head coach and one of the better innovators of the sport in the last 15, 20 years. And we talked about in the interview, unlike last year where UNLV had a solid quarterback in Jaden Mayava, but wasn't really a big runner, good chance that UNLV gives the most snaps to Matthew Sluka, who was a great running quarterback at Holy Cross, a guy who rushed for well over 2,000 yards over his last 2 seasons at Holy Cross. And that, I think, gives Marion in that go-go offense even more options to use the quarterback as a number in the run game, certainly more so than they did last season, even though it was still an explosive offense. So it's imperative this Cougar defense does a much better job just not being fooled by that eye candy, by that pre-snap motion, and doing things better like tackling in open space. Obviously, open space tackling is always going to make you better, but in a game like this one, there's going to be a lot of fakes. A lot of times where if you mess up an assignment, if your guy doesn't do the right thing, it is going to be extremely costly. And I don't expect perfection. UNLV is going to get there from time to time in this game. I think, to me, it's about what Fritz loves to harp on in practice, the Cougs not being the Cougs. You've been preparing for a while for this game, more than you get from most other opponents in a season, all other opponents in a season. And this opponent that does a lot of razzle-dazzle. I want to see a defense that looks remotely prepared for it, because outside of 2-ish quarters against the Longhorns last October, we hardly ever saw it the last 2 seasons against an opposing offense worth anything. And really, in that one good season, as great as Marcus Jones and DeMarion Williams were, and I won't take a bit away from their great final season of the program, the Cougs faced a lot of really good offenses in that 21 season either. So I don't need to see it for 4 quarters. I just want to see it often enough to give this team a chance to win this game. And some proof that's like, okay, it's not perfect, but I see what Shao Wood's kind of building towards here with this defense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's to your point, they're going to get theirs occasionally, right? You're not going to be able. That's what happens with option teams that run not necessarily the triple option, because I don't think UNLV is running the triple option out here, but there's some of those concepts.
The option like stuff.
Yeah, and sometimes you are going to. They're just going to beat you. They're going to make the right read and they're going to break one off for 15, 20 yards. And so for me, it's going to be about just making sure that you contain them, and when they do damage you, that they don't damage you a ton. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right, Bobby, who is the most critical player, if you want to go a little bit more general, most critical position group to the Cougs coming out winners of this game?
I'm gonna have to say that it's gonna be someone on the offense, and it's going to be like I said earlier. I really think that the O-line's gonna have to show up. Our defense scares me, and so I think we're gonna have to put up points, and keeping Donovan Smith on his feet is going to be what we're going to have to do to get that done. What about you?
I actually, maybe because I'm the guy who thought of this question, I didn't have to think about this one very long. It's Latrell McCutcheon. I think your number one cornerback. We talked about with Mike, UNLV's top returning receiver, Ricky White, one of the very best at what he does in college football. It was a coup that UNLV kept him in the scarlet and gray for this coming season. That's a guy who could have played for a lot of programs out there. So as much as I don't love the idea of seeing UVH try and figure out a way to solve a player as good as White, I think anytime a guy sticks around the program they've been with, they play have a big role in resurrecting like White has. And I know UNLV is changing quarterbacks, but I mean, this is a guy who put up good numbers with a revolving door of quarterbacks the season before last. Like whatever UNLV is doing, Ricky White's going to get his.
Right.
And I don't think any U of H player will see more of White on Saturday than McCutcheon. And like I said with the defense a bit ago, and I don't need McCutcheon to be perfect. UNLV is going to find a way to get White the ball a few different times in space for decent gains. That's just what we should expect. That's what they're going to game plan around. I just want McCutcheon, after a year of not seeing the field, to have some key wins at key times. A 3rd and long where his coverage is good enough that White can't get the first down. A red zone PBU where White can't haul in a TD and they have to sell for a field goal. And you don't expect that 100% of the time. That's not fair to the guy, but if McCutcheon can make it more difficult to keep White from getting involved in the game, I feel like that solves a really large percentage of what you need to solve. Doesn't solve everything. They have Jacob DeJesus. They have Jaden Thomas, a really good running back. They have Casey Kane, I think an X factor at receiver. But just solving that, which is no easy equation to solve, I think really gets you a lot of the way to winning this football game.
Yeah, absolutely. I have no qualms with that choice coming from you either.
All right, Bobby. We're going to do our week in, week out thing here. I want to preface this by saying, this is my form of a gambling disclaimer. This is not actually gambling. This is not us betting real American dollars in any way. And even though Bobby and I have had fun doing it, I think we're both at the point where we kind of recognize that it's just like, I don't know, man, this isn't the best thing. Like most people, this isn't a good thing for them. Like you and I, you and I don't have like gambling type personalities really. Like for us, like, oh yeah, like we had like our afternoon last fall at the sports book. Like that was fun.
Yeah,
I didn't wake up 3 days afterwards being like itching and being like, I gotta get over there and put down a bet. I gotta get over there and get like $50 down on, Ball State at Central Michigan after this. I was like, that was fun. Like it was fun seeing like what games we won and lost. I lost some money. I had a good time with my friend. I bet what was ultimately a trivial amount of my money. Like enough that it qualified for a minimum bet, enough that some of them paid out like a fun amount of money to get back at the little window, but not that much.
I think you and I think once the Rangers World Series bet hit, I was like, I think I came out ahead that day $5, but I was fully okay.
You were the only one
losing
in the black.
The 15. Like I was okay because like I would have ended up losing $20 on the day. So it's like, oh, okay, cool. But it was more we went for the fun there.
So, and we've also on this show more broadly, we've had the chance to endorse sports betting products in the show and have said flatly no to it just because we don't want to endorse that kind of thing. Not as like a moralizing thing, just as I don't really want to like put an endorsement on that specific kind of product. Mm-hmm. That's just not something I want to do. Like the amount of money that we could possibly get from that to me doesn't outweigh I don't necessarily want to associate the podcast that we all do here at the Gambling Product. So
I agree.
It's a lot of way of prefacing saying Bobby and I with $1,000 fake dollars each of us at the start of the season. This segment, which I have not told Bobby the name of until now, we were going to call this one for the 2024 season in honor of the Disturbed song as a mainstay. I know at Texans games, and I think at large football games in general, calling this one Down with the Pick-ness. Bobby and Sam's 2024
I'm leaving.
Cougar season
this segment
pickup.
Is all yours now. Just whatever. Down with the Pick-ness.
Down with the Pick-ness. You didn't want to know about it until now.
He said,
my voice is too cracked
I'm gonna
up.
pull
It's
the. I'm gonna pull
goes,
the.
Oh, waka waka.
I'm gonna pull the curtain back a little bit here. So we came up with this idea last night. I think
within the last 48 hours.
Yeah, within the last 48. It wasn't last night. Yeah, it was last night. Anyways, within the last 48 hours, we came up with this name, and Sam and I were talking about kind of the run sheet, how we were going to go through the show. Because despite how it comes across, we actually do plan this a little bit. I know it doesn't always seem it, but we do plan this a little bit. So we're talking about it, and he's like, by the way, and like I've been slammed with work the last 2 days, and so he sends me a text that says, by the way, there's going to be, I came up with a name for the picking segment, and I said, hit me. And he goes, do you want to know now or do you want to know later? And I didn't respond. I forgot to respond. Like I read the text and I was like, I was doing something else work-wise. And he was like, all right, I guess you're going to hear it when we do it. And Down with the Pick-ness. So I'm not going to argue with him. Down with the Pick-ness. Let's go, buddy.
So we're going to pick, based on the actual lines of the game, we have 1,000 fake dollars. We're not wagering any money, though. The winner at the end of the season gets to make the other host do something humiliating, but not to the level of like when people lose in fantasy football, they have to I'm not going to make Bobby sit at a Waffle House and eat like waffles for 6 hours to reduce his punishment. No, but just like not that far. But I sort of inspired. Like there's a British soccer show I like where like one of the guys lost their season pick'em thing, and you had to take a coach, like basically their equivalent of a Greyhound bus, from like the northernmost city that has an English soccer team to the southernmost. So that's Sunderland to Plymouth, which was like a 7-8 hour bus ride each way. and he could not bring like his laptop and like play games and stuff like that.
So
He just had to do that shit. And so I'm not gonna make Bobby do like a 16-hour bus ride on this, but that was kind of my inspiration. Like maybe have Bobby do like a land acknowledgement style thing at the start of an episode about the 2017 World Series winning Houston Astros. That's an idea, but it's not what I am married to at this time.
What's your pick?
All right. We were doing this based on the actual lines. I think the total is the money line, the actual game spread, which I chose to go with the total here. I think this is going to be over 54.5 points for the game. I think U of H's offense has questions. I just think these two teams, there are enough defensive questions about both teams that I think this is going to be at least a 34-24 kind of game, even if the Cougars are going to lose again, though I hope they aren't, obviously. And I think 54.5 was way lower than I expected. So I didn't really have to think that much about it. Over 54.5, and Bobby, I am betting 75 fake Pawd dollars this week on the show. I'm going to be keeping track of this in a spreadsheet. I'll be updating future weeks that, hey, Bobby's at X dollars, I'm at Y dollars, and kind of letting people into the contest as the season goes on.
All right, so I actually am placing 2 bets on this game.
Woo!
I am with you on the over. 54.5 just seems ridiculously low. My thought was 31-28, somewhere in that range. Either way, 3-point game. So I am 125 on the over, and then I'm gonna go $50 for the Cougars to win money line. I think the Cougs are gonna win straight up. I don't know if it's going to be by the 2.5, 3 that it's kind of been hovering around. 28-24, right? That covers it, but it doesn't make you feel comfortable with it. A 28-27 game you could see that happening. For me as well, I could see the Cougs winning a very close 28-27 game, something along those lines. So I am overall 175 total, but I am 125 on the over and 50 for the money line. So since we both bet on the over, that means the under is hitting, as was shown when I went to Vegas last year. So
exactly. History's
get ready, guys.
Here.
This is going to be a 14-13 game, and we'll be crying the whole time. As long as the Cougs win, we'll be all right, though.
Last question before we leave football, Bob. It is one I did not put in the run sheet because I think it's one you can. What are the vibes here? What are our vibes before we leave the topic of football until we see toe meet leather?
I think the vibes are. I think they're good. I think everyone's excited. There's a new generation or a new era of Cougar football. One that I don't think we've been this excited for since probably Tom Herman. So the vibes are high around the team. I think you and I all off season, every time we see Coach Fritz doing something, it's just like, oh yeah, that guy just loves ball. Like he doesn't do anything but ball. All he does is football and family. You can see he talks about his family and he talks about football. He's not going out. This is not meant to be a shot at a previous coach, but he's not going out. You don't see him hanging out by his pool and doing all these different things, and you hear stories of him running around the city or anything. No, this guy just does football. That's all Willie Fritz does. And so it's just a different feeling going into the season. Dana, Herman, they brought a lot of excitement in terms of getting in front of the media and going crazy and doing things like that. That's not what Fritz is going to do, but Fritz is going to win some football games. And while I don't know if this season is going to be like Tom Herman's first, right? I do think that the excitement about what the football product is going to look like is higher than I've seen since Tom Herman.
Probably won't be Tom Herman's first season, but I fully co-sign on the positive vibes around this team. Bobby, speaking of a team with positive vibes around it, let's talk about Cougar Volleyball, who also opens their season this week and I think is worthy of a long look at their season preview. I will briefly give the folks some background if you allow me before we get into our volleyball specific discussion topics.
Let's do it.
So 6th season under head coach David Rare. Since 2019, he has been with the Cougars. I think inarguably the best hire that was made under Chris Pesman has just been an absolute home run since he set foot on campus and started coaching this program. It has strong first season going 11-7 in the Big 12, which is a very, very good volleyball league. Unfortunately, despite being a top 25 team for basically the entire season, the Cougars got put into the regional of the number 2 overall seed, Stanford, a superpower of the sport. Cougs saw their season end in the round of 32 with an incredibly close, heartbreaking 5-set loss to the Cardinal. I want to quickly note who's no longer here because these were all very impactful players. Abby Jackson leaves as probably the most significant player who's come through the program this century from her 5 years with the Cougs. It is genuinely going to be weird to watch a Cougar volleyball match and not see a redhead wearing number 24 for the Cougs. I don't think there's any description I can give her career that does it justice other than saying that she is retired the jersey good. You also lose Kenneth Sauer, who, unlike Jackson, came to U of H at the end of her college career, but whose single 2024 season was, I would say, the best single season by an outside hitter in this century of the program's history, and in the handful of best ever. And certainly in the program's earlier years, there were some very, very good players that came through. Earned her third straight first team All Big 12 honors, and just one game, but ended her career, I think, appropriately with a fantastic 24 kill, 9 dig effort in that close loss to Stanford. Also add to that list Rachel Tullis, who started middle blocker from basically the moment Rare got here, along with Jackson that first season 2019. Morgan Yonda, incredible multi-sport athlete who split the Sarah duties with Annie Cook, and who was still with this program actually as its director of operations. Grad transfer Nena Mbanu, who came in from Louisville, who gave the Cougs another high-level contributor after the program needed some after the previous season's graduating class. And I don't say all those players to bog down this year's preview or make it seem like being any good this coming season is impossible. Quite the opposite. We're still very high on this program, but I think it's worth a reminder of how many incredible players from last year's team saw their college careers end after last season. You don't easily replace players like that. The success of those athletes does give an already very good head coach and staff the recruiting ammo to keep this program as a consistently good one, but you don't easily replace Abby Jackson. You don't easily replace Kenneth Sauer. You don't easily replace the contributions of all those players. But like I said, a lot of really exciting players coming back. So who are a couple of the key returners that you're excited about who, could play bigger roles or will certainly be, I think, the frontline names of this team for you?
All right, so in terms of players that I think are going to return and that we're going to see, one of the big things that this program has is it's a culture that they've really built, and losing the players that you mentioned is really something that is going to be, you lose a lot of culture with that, right? With Abby Jackson, she was here and she kind of built. She was one of the people one of the players who built this program to what it is now. Without her, you don't know where the U of H program is. Not to say that Coach Rare couldn't have gotten it done without her, but to your point, she was retired the jersey levels of good. And so you're losing her in that leadership, but you hope that you have Kate Georgiadis and Annie Cook return. So you're getting a lot of leadership there. Kate Georgiadis was named to the All Big 12 preseason team. So you're getting a lot of talent as well as a lot of the leadership there. So I really think those two, not that I need to come in here and tell you what those two have done and have meant to the program, but keeping those two is hopefully going to keep the culture intact. I saw an interview with Coach Rare, and I want to say it was in the Daily Cougar, where he talked about there's 9 new players coming in, and getting them ingrained in the Cougar volleyball culture is really, really important. So those are two players that I think are going to lead this team in 2024 and keep us going.
Yeah, there are a number of right answers, but none righter than the two you named, Kate Georgiadis and Annie Cook. I think Georgiadis, like you said, preseason All Big 12, 3-time first team All Conference pick from her 3 seasons prior to this one with the Cougar program. Said a lot of superlatives about Abby Jackson, both of us, and I think we would repeat all of them for Georgiadis in terms of what kind of impact on the program
Absolutely
she's had. Incredible player, if possible, even more incredible representative of the university and herself. Like any team sports, could take more than Kate Georgiadis for this team to win against tough slave opponents, but really gives you, having her at libero, the defending Big 12 libero of the year, really gives you kind of a nice defensive base to work from. Someone that can't help but raise the level of those playing around her. Annie Cook, who we've talked about, back in her 5th season of the program as either the primary or the split starter at the center position, which, if you're less familiar with volleyball, very similar role to the quarterback in football or the point guard in basketball. Started her college career incredibly strong. It's been a while, but I'd almost forgotten about this. Was the AAC Freshman of the Year and Setter of the Year in that spring 2021 season, which is kind of the breakout season for this program before the tournament season under Rare. And for the past 2 seasons was kind of a shared starter with Morgan Yonda. And having Cook and Yonda allowed U of H to kind of show some unique looks on the court. And I think one of the interesting preseason questions is, obviously Cook's going to play a big role. Does this go back to Cook taking the majority of the reps this season, or will Cook be splitting it with one of the newcomers? Because there are some better newcomers we'll get to in a second on this roster. Also going to mention Katie Corelli is back. Came in before last season as a transfer from Ole Miss. Likely have an even bigger role in 24 after being third on the team in kills last year behind Sauer and Jackson. Had a really nice 11-kill performance to end the regular season, which is a home win over K-State as well. Bakra Rahman, she's a 4th-year player in the program. Didn't play a ton the last 2 seasons, but who I suspect will have a bigger role based on what we've heard about Kellen Morin, who's a returning starter at middle blocker, but who we'd heard suffered a serious injury back in the spring. Really, obviously, hope we heard wrong. Hope Morin plays, because she's an incredible athlete at the net and hit a really good 387 last season. So I think Rahman's probably the answer to the question of which returning player is going to have the biggest increase in their role from last season this one, but obviously no headline player is more important than Cook and Georgiadis. I know at least one from us talking before we aired transfer you're really excited about. Who's your number one newcomer, and you can mention some more if you want, who you think will have a big impact on this coming season who wasn't on the roster a year ago?
Yeah, I think number one's going to be Angela Grieve. She really seems to be that Abby Jackson replacement. Finished 3rd at Miami with 280 kills. Contributed 50 blocks, 6 solo, 44 assisted. Really, really strong net player there. And with Abby Jackson leaving, you need someone to fill that production. Is somebody a transfer necessarily going to come in and be better than an Abby Jackson? Probably not. But Angela Grieve seems to be the plug-and-play option for Coach Rare going forward this year. We're also going to see a new face in Rebecca Rockison. Rockison played for Jacksonville. The thing I can really see translating from Jacksonville to U of H is her 9.87 assists per set. Her with Angela Grieve, I can really see both their numbers increasing and going up. Coach Rare has said on the podcast previous that he likes having 2 setters on the court at once. So this should be a phenomenal fit for U of H's offense.
Yeah, I agree. Grieve is probably has the first name. 2-time second team All ACC selection, was 6th in Miami program history in total kills as well. Like, you're not getting a player who's leaving Miami because she wants more playing time here. She's leaving Miami because she thinks she can perform on a higher stage here. That's kind of a crazy thing. That's us. Like, that's us, Bobby.
Yeah, we're the higher stage.
Yeah, like, was with Kenneth Sauer last year. I mean, Tech hasn't really has been a great volleyball program, but it was still so crazy for me to fathom at the time. It was just like, Kenneth Sauer was a multi-time first-team All-Big 12 selection at Tech and chose to come here because she thought she could win at a higher level here. That's how good Cougar volleyball is under Dave Red. It's like one example, but just like something we probably couldn't have fathomed before Dave got here in 2019. Want to also mention another veteran outside hitter coming in from an ACC program, Juliana Dalton from Pitt. Was a rotation player at Pitt, wasn't a true starter there, but was a rotation player for one of the truly elite college volleyball programs. And I think kind of like Nena Mbanu did from Louisville last year, could come in here and play a bigger role, but was still someone talented enough to get on the court for one of the truly elite programs like Pitt. In her freshman season at Wazoo, she was a Pac-12 all-freshman selection, was top 25 in the Pac-12 in kills that season. Not a transfer, but a name I saw, Bobby, a bunch from what accounts I was able to find, mostly from a Rice message board of the U of H Rice volleyball scrimmage from last Saturday, was one of this year's incoming freshmen, Lily Barron from Lewis Center, Ohio. Can't say for sure if it was because maybe the staff gave freshmen more looks because it was a scrimmage, but I saw her name come up a lot for that to be the case, for her to just be playing a bunch extra than more than she would during the season. And this freshman class would be the first one where we start to see the benefits of Rare and the staff being able to sell U of H as a Big 12 top 25 regular program to recruit. So I'm curious to see what we see from Barron in that group as a whole for the 2024 season. I wanted to mention also another newcomer's name who I saw mentioned a lot from the U of H side of what I could find about that scrimmage was super senior setter to what we were talking about with Annie Cook, super senior setter Rebecca Rakasan, who comes in from Jacksonville University, where she started the previous 2 seasons. I agree with you. I think if he has druthers, obviously a lot of Cook out there, but I think he would like to have Cook and another veteran setter. And Rakasan didn't play for a great Jacksonville team, but she was third in the Atlantic Sun in assists per set last year. And not that you can easily plug and replace Morgan Yonda, but Yonda also came in here from a smaller conference team in Sam Houston, where she played before she spent her last 2 seasons at U of H. One more player I'll also mention, apologies if my pronunciation, her last name was wrong, Avery Shemitis, who returns home to the Houston area after playing her first 2 college seasons at Pepperdine. She played in 26 matches over the past 2 seasons, wasn't a starter. Pepperdine is a good postseason kind of program. Curious if the staff thinks she can play a bigger role here, and if the staff thinks she can get more out of her playing for her hometown team. So in the preseason, this team was 8th out of 15 in the Big 12, which I think, to our gut reaction, felt kind of low to us. And it still feels kind of low, even if it's worth reminding ourselves that this is a really good volleyball conference. And even with the departure of the 2-time defending champs UT Austin, being 8th in this conference still means you could be a good in the postseason kind of volleyball program. Why do you think the Cougars were that low? Simply, in your opinion.
I think we lost a lot of talent, right? And you have the replacements that are coming in have proven it elsewhere, but in this conference, one small step back is 4 spots, right? And so I think that's kind of what the quote media is seeing. So it's kind of going to be one of those prove it years for Coach Rare, where it's a are you building? Do you have a program, or did you have a lot of talent, right? And I think that's kind of what the media is saying here when they place the Cougs in 8th. And the funny part is 8th may still make the tournament and have a pretty good seed with this conference.
Yeah, I mean, again, lose the Longhorns, but you bring in Arizona State, who's quite a good program. BYU was an even more established outside the power conference program that came in here with the Cougars. The Cougs with the U were actually picked 2nd in the preseason behind Kansas. They predicted preseason champions. So deep league, and not very many nights off. Like, you do get even West Virginia. West Virginia was a bad team last year. West Virginia poached a coach that had just led their team to the Sweet 16, a team we're actually going to mention briefly here before we go. Like, that's how serious Big 12 volleyball is. Like, they're not going to have very many nights off, even for a program like this one that I think is a good one. And I think there's certainly teams the Cougs can expect to beat on the schedule, and is very good league, but it is that good of a league. This isn't just like because we're in the Big 12. This is a sport that the Big 12 is particularly good at and particularly deep in. So I think they'll do better than 8th, but I don't think drastically better than 8th. I think ultimately probably be somewhere in that 5th to 7th range, if I had to guess. Yeah. And that there won't be very much separating 8th from 3rd or 4th in the standings. I think when it's all said and done, if I had to kind of predict how it'll look at the end of the year.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. I don't think it's as I think that kind of middle there from about 4 to 8, 9, you can kind of switch up the teams and put them in any order. And I think it would be fair the more you kind of look at it.
Yeah. Season opens on Friday at 6 p.m. Central in Omaha. Actually, same city as the 2022 regional, which is a real iconic postseason moment for this program. The Omaha Invite, presented by Sarpy County Tourism. Gotta have the full name here on the show. First opponent will be the hosts, Omaha, who went to last year's NCAA tournament. Their first in program history as the Summit League tournament champions. Funny enough, the Cougs actually faced the Summit League champ South Dakota the last time they were in Omaha. That was the crazy game where Kate Georgiadis saved a ball on the table at Creighton, where the Cougars would later eliminate Auburn to go to the Sweet 16. So fun place to return to, but not a pushover opponent by any stretch. And something I noticed looking at their schedule last season is that they really challenged themselves a year ago in non-conference. They didn't have a great overall win-loss record, but they played all these really good teams. And come conference play, they were one of the best teams in that league because I think they had tested themselves. So while U of H will be a name opponent, it's not like the returning players here don't have experience against a high-level opponent, and they're going to get them at home, which I think is going to be, it's a big moment for Omaha, a big way to start their season. It doesn't get much easier on Saturday. The Cougs are going to face Washington State, another really tough opponent, a team that went 14-6 in their final season in the Pac-12, made last year's Sweet 16 before losing to Pitt. Implosion of their conference, I kind of alluded to a moment ago, did have the unfortunate effect of them losing their very successful coach, Jen Greeny, who left to take the same job at West Virginia, is replaced by her former assistant coach, Corey Schrader. Still expect Wazoo to be a tough opponent, and I'll be very, very hopeful about the season if the Cougs can come back to Houston 2-0 after this weekend. Bobby, any thoughts about Omaha or Washington State that you would like to add?
Not many that you didn't cover. So, yeah.
My bad.
You're good, man. You're all good. No, it's I think the biggest thing is you see Omaha. Omaha's a solid team. Again, their win-loss record last year isn't something that's going to terrify you or anything like that, but they did challenge themselves. And so I think if the Cougs come away 2-0 this weekend, the Houston Cougars, sorry, I forgot we're playing Wazoo. So if the Houston Cougars can come out 2-0 this weekend, I'm actually going to feel, not that I need to feel better about this program, but it's going to be a good measuring stick this weekend.
I was trying to do an improvised segment here. I went to the Sarpy County tourism website, Sarpy County being where Omaha is, and they had a tab for golf, and I was gonna try to see if you could spot the fake Sarpy County golf course here before we go. But Bobby, I shit you not, their website, gosarpy.com, if you go to there's a little tab for outdoor recreation, history museums, golf, arts, entertainment. So I clicked on the golf link, and it's just a static picture of a nice, green in the morning that says, the graphic. Oh no, actually it just loaded. All right.
Hit me.
I'm going to name 4 golf courses. I need you to spot the fake Sarpy County golf course as a connoisseur of American golf. You ready?
Hit me.
First one, Eagle Hills Golf Course.
Okay.
Second one, Terra Hills Golf Course.
Okay.
Third, Butte Meadow Golf Course.
Okay.
And the fourth, Lost Rail Golf Club.
Okay, so I want to say it's Butte, but I'm also thinking Lost Rail because there's a course in DFW, I believe, called Lost Rail. So I'm going to go with Butte Meadow as my guess, though.
You're such a pro. It is Butte Meadow, Lost Rail. Stand atop the clubhouse, Rich, and look west, Bobby, toward the setting sun of the Elkhorn and Platte Rivers. I'm sure it's a great 18 to play.
I Googled it. It is a very private course. I typed it in. There are 2 tabs on their website when you first log in, and it says members and guests. So you click guests.
It's stay out.
That's it. Yeah, it's don't be a poor. And so it actually looks really nice.
sorry to give you golf envy of the many great golf options of Sarpy County, Nebraska. Buddy, you want to take us home and out of this ditch I've gotten us into?
Yeah. I'll slowly climb us out of the golf ditch there. Well, that's it for this week's pod. Just some final housekeeping. We do it at the front. We do it at the back. If you have some feedback or you want to talk U of H sports, you can find us on Twitter at SH Podcast. You can find me on Twitter at #1Coog. And if you just miss talking to Dustin or you just like talking to him more than us, you can find us on Blue Sky at podcast@bsky.social or, whatever it is. And if you hate social media and you only use email, which I guess is how other people felt when they were oh no, I'm never sending an email. I'm going to send a traditional letter. If you're now I hate social media, I'm only going to send an email.
Guy.
If you're a big email guy, if you sit in a meeting and go, this could have been an email, you can email us at shpodcast@gmail.com. And if you heard all of that, this wonderful, what are we probably at, an hour, 15 minutes now, and you want to throw some money at us, you can check out our Patreon. We hope to pump out more and more content, including some post-game shows, depending on who's at games, who's not at games, things like that. And if you're still here, even after hearing all that, and you are still here listening to me ramble and ramble and ramble, you are the absolute best. And as always, Sam,
Go Cougs.
All right. Go Coogs! Let's go!